For the second week running, police have arrested demonstrators protesting against the government's designation of non-violent direct action group Palestine Action as a terrorist organisation. In London, dozens of protesters gathered in Parliament Square at 1 p.m. on Saturday. One group surrounded the statue of anti-apartheid activist and former South African President Nelson Mandela, holding signs that read, "I oppose genocide, I support Palestine Action." A second group sat beneath the statue of Mahatma Gandhi, also deliberately breaching counter-terror law by publicly expressing support for a prescribed terrorist organisation via cardboard signs. A short while later, dozens of Met Police officers formed a human barrier around the two groups of protesters, preventing journalists from getting anywhere near to them. Also, then, further officers moved in, making arrests. In total, 46 people were taken into custody. A great use of police time, as I'm sure you can agree. Most of the demonstrators surrendered to the police, allowing themselves to be escorted to waiting vans. But a few protesters offered passive resistance, lying down in the face of arrest. Many were older people, who groups of police then carried away to police vans. In total, 46 people were arrested in London, and it's reported that over 300 police officers were involved in the operation. That's 300 police officers needed to confiscate a few cardboard signs and drag away peaceful protesters, many of them pensioners. An action also took place in Manchester. That was the moment Manchester police barged through a group of peaceful protesters to begin carting other peaceful protesters away. Why? Because they, too, were holding signs that simply read, "I oppose genocide, I support Palestine Action," in violation of the Terrorism Act. 16 Manchester protesters were arrested. In Cardiff, 13 people were arrested, including this 83-year-old man. That's after protesters gathered outside the offices of BBC Wales, again holding signs reading, "I oppose genocide, I support Palestine Action." In total, over 70 people across the country were arrested under counter-terrorism laws on Saturday, all for holding signs. Now, those three protests were organised by Defend Our Juries, a group whose aim is to protect the right of juries to acquit defendants on grounds of conscience. That right is being increasingly eroded by our government and by the courts as part of a broader clampdown and criminalisation of dissent. And in each case, the group sent letters to the police ahead of their actions to alert them to the protesters' intention to break the law. Some independent protests took place over the weekend, protesting the prescription of Palestine Action, but they got a more mixed police response. In Derry, in the north of Ireland, veteran civil rights activists gathered in the Guildhall Square to protest the ban of Palestine Action. They also held "I oppose genocide, I support Palestine Action" signs in contravention of the law. But no arrests were made in Derry, perhaps given the sensitivities of making mass arrests in a largely Irish nationalist city in the north of Ireland over the weekend of the 11th and 12th of July. Individuals also protested the prescription of Palestine Action. In Kendal, this man displayed his support for Palestine Action, but despite having notified the police in advance, he was left alone. Meanwhile, in Scotland, a man believed to have been wearing this shirt was arrested. It was sold by the Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign, and it reads, quote, "Genocide in Palestine, time to take action." Kieran, I bet you feel safer knowing that these, older gentlemen and ladies have been dragged off by police into, the gaping mouths of their police vans.
It's an incredibly serious topic, but I like to think it's a result of the seriousness that I have the Jose Mourinho interview in my head. The famous, "I cannot talk. If I talk, I will be in trouble." That's what I have on repeat in my head whenever I think about this topic. So I'll just pivot to one thing that I think is relevant, but that is safe for me to say, which is when I worked in Tower Hamlets for the local authority, around the time of October 7th and for about 5 months afterwards, Palestinian flags were going up all across the borough deep in communities towards the east of the borough and towards the west of the borough, all throughout the borough. And we were under tremendous pressure from senior council officers, from the police, and from the Israel lobby in the form of the Jewish Chronicle, in the form of UK Lawyers for Israel and others who kept sending us waves and waves of letters telling us that we must take these flags down. Otherwise, we'd be in terrible trouble, legal trouble. And we took the view that if we did go into those communities and take those flags down, that 5 more would appear the following day. A, that it was a Hydra-headed problem, in other words, but also that it was totally wrong to destroy, if you like, to kind of upend organic expressions of solidarity from communities across the world. What business did we have doing that? And in the end, unfortunately, they were taken down. But the point I'm making in relation to the prescribed Palestine action is that one of the key things we said when we made the decision not to take the flags down is that it's going to become unenforceable. And by being unenforceable, it is going to be an endless drain on public money and public resources. And I suspect that eventually the police and all of the relevant authorities, and even maybe the political class, who knows, will have the same epiphany several months or years down the line.
I mean, look, one thing that I will say about this, because I am allowed to say this, is that we all have a sense of what terrorism is. It's action that threatens people's lives. It makes people feel frightened. It makes them feel worried about their safety. And that fear is the mechanism used by a terrorist group to pursue its goals, whether it's a religious goal, whether it's a political goal, or anything else. I find it very, very difficult to believe that any of what Palestine Action did, whether it was the actions they took at Elbit or whether it was the action taken at Brize Norton, made people feel fear. Now, I accept that people should be held criminally responsible and it should go to a fair jury trial. But in my mind, it's simply not terrorism. It's not terrorism to do these things. And I would say the same thing were it a right-wing group or anybody else. It should not be classified as terrorism. That's got a specific meaning because legally now, we're forced to watch our every word because, we're worried that, the likes of UK Lawyers for Israel and Campaign Against Anti-Semitism will try and, knock on us to the cops.